I shall take you in as close as I possibly can." Captain Edward Fegen said those words to his officers aboard HMS Jervis Bay weeks before the 5th of November, 1940. It sounds like the promise of a man preparing to fight. It was not. It was the confession of a man who had already done the arithmetic and understood he was going to die. Because Fegen knew something that most of his crew did not. His 7 6-inch guns were Vickers relics from 1899. They had first seen action in the Boer War. Their maximum range, on a good day with fresh barrels, was roughly 14,000 yards. But the barrels were not fresh. They were so worn that accurate fire beyond 10,000 yards was practically impossible. The German pocket battleship Admiral Scheer carried 6 11-inch guns that could reach over 36,000 yards. She could stand at 17,000 yards, twice the distance Jervis Bay's shells could travel, and pour fire into a target that could never fire back. And that is exactly what happened. On the evening of the 5th of November, 1940, Fegen turned a converted passenger liner with no armor, no radar, and no fire control directly toward a pocket battleship, and opened fire with every gun he had. Not a single shell reached the enemy. Not one. The German battleship did not need to dodge, did not need to maneuver. She simply stood at safe range and delivered salvo after salvo of 11-inch shells into a ship that used to carry tourists to Australia. 22 minutes later, Jervis Bay was a burning wreck. 190 of her crew were dead. Her captain had lost an arm to shrapnel and kept commanding until a shell killed him. And not so much as a scratch marked the hull of Admiral Scheer. But here is the part that turns a slaughter into something else entirely. 32 of the 37 merchant ships in convoy HX-84 scattered into the North Atlantic darkness and reached British ports carrying the food, fuel, steel, and ammunition that a nation under the Blitz needed to survive. And the thing that kept Jervis Bay burning and afloat long enough for that darkness to fall was not guns, not armor, not speed. It was 24,000 empty steel drums packed into her cargo holds before she left port. The Admiralty expected her to die. They just needed her to die slowly. To understand why the Royal Navy sent a passenger liner to fight a battleship, you need to understand how desperate Britain was in the autumn of 1940. France had fallen 5 months earlier. The Luftwaffe was bombing London every night. The only thing keeping Britain in the war was the Atlantic convoy system, hundreds of merchant ships crossing from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Liverpool, carrying everything from aviation fuel to frozen beef. Between June and October of 1940, U-boats had sunk over 270 Allied ships. The Germans called it the happy time. The Royal Navy called it a catastrophe. There were simply not enough warships to escort every convoy. The solution was the armed merchant cruiser. Take a large passenger liner, bolt on some old guns, paint it gray, and send it out to escort convoys through the mid-Atlantic gap where no destroyers or corvettes could reach. The sailors who crewed these ships had their own name for them: Admiralty-made coffins. Jervis Bay had been built by Vickers at Barrow-in-Furness in 1922, the last of 5 identical Bay-class liners for the Australian Government Commonwealth Line. She carried emigrants from London to Fremantle through the Suez Canal, 732 passengers in 3rd class and 12 in 1st. She had spent 18 years ferrying families to new lives in Australia before the Admiralty requisitioned her in August 1939 and sent her to war. The conversion was brutal in its honesty. 7 6-inch guns from the Victorian era were bolted onto pre-installed mounting points. 2 3-inch anti-aircraft guns dated from 1894. A basic rangefinder and voice tubes handled fire control. 24,000 empty sealed steel drums were crammed into the cargo holds to keep her floating after the hull was inevitably punctured. No armor plating was added. The thin merchant hull, the flammable wooden interior fittings, and the high-sided profile that one officer called a side of a barn target were all retained. She could make 15 knots. A modern destroyer could make 36 knots. But here is the detail that made the difference between a footnote and a legend. After HMS Rawalpindi, another armed merchant cruiser, was sunk in November 1939, the Admiralty noticed that Rawalpindi's battleship gray paint had made her easy to spot. So Jervis Bay was repainted in the peacetime livery of the Aberdeen and Commonwealth Line: green hull, white superstructure, buff funnel. She looked exactly like the merchant ships she was escorting. When Admiral Scheer's reconnaissance seaplane reported the convoy on the 5th of November, the observer noted no escort visible. The disguise worked perfectly. The Germans had no idea they were heading toward a warship until it was too late to avoid the confrontation that followed. Convoy HX-84 sailed from Halifax on the 28th of October, 1940. 38 ships in 9 columns, 600 yards apart. They carried aviation fuel, steel plate, aluminium, copper, ammunition, frozen meat, butter, cheese, maize, timber, military vehicles, and 12 crated aircraft lashed to the deck of the freighter Truallard. The tanker San Demetrio alone held 12,000 tons of aviation spirit. She was a floating bomb. The cargo in this single convoy represented a significant fraction of Britain's weekly imports. Lose it, and factories stopped. Aircraft stayed grounded. People went hungry. And guarding all of it was one ship, HMS Jervis Bay. She had no destroyers alongside her, no corvettes, no cruisers. The 2 Canadian destroyers that escorted the convoy out of Halifax had turned back after 350 miles, as was standard. The next warship reinforcements were not expected until the 6th of November. One day too late. Admiral Scheer had slipped through the Denmark Strait on the night of the 31st of October, surviving a hurricane in the process, and entered the open Atlantic undetected. She was a Deutschland-class pocket battleship, 12,000 tons of armored warship designed to hunt convoys. 6 11-inch guns in 2 triple turrets, each salvo delivering 2.5 tons of ordnance, 8 5.9-inch secondary guns, 8 torpedo tubes, 80 millimeters of inclined belt armor, 28 knots, and something Jervis Bay did not even know existed, a FUMO-22 radar set, so secret that only a handful of Scheer's own crew knew it was aboard. Her captain was Theodore Cranky, a veteran torpedo boat commander from the First World War. His orders were straightforward: find convoys, destroy them, and avoid engagement with any warship that might damage Scheer and end her raiding cruise. But on the 5th of November, Cranky's signals intelligence team intercepted radio traffic that placed an eastbound convoy roughly 90 miles to the south. He launched his Arado floatplane at 9:40 in the morning. By noon, the pilot was back with coordinates. At roughly 3:45 in the afternoon, lookouts aboard the 16,000-ton liner Rangitiki, the tallest ship in the convoy, spotted smoke on the northern horizon. It was the burning wreck of the banana boat Mopan, which Scheer had intercepted 3 hours earlier. That 2-hour delay sinking a single unarmed freighter would prove critical. Every minute Cranky wasted on Mopan was a minute closer to darkness. As the unknown warship closed, Jervis Bay's chief yeoman flashed the day's recognition challenge by signal lamp. Cranky tried a bluff. He told his signals officer, "She will give her recognition signal in a moment, whatever it turns out to be. Repeat it at once, as though we were calling her." Jervis Bay flashed the letters MAG. Scheer immediately repeated them. But Fegen was not fooled. No friendly warship could be approaching from that direction. He identified the silhouette as a Deutschland-class pocket battleship, and he made his decision. Red rockets arced into the sky, the prearranged scatter signal. Every merchant ship in convoy HX-84 was to turn away, make smoke, and run. Fegen sent a coded signal to the Admiralty giving Scheer's exact position. Then he ordered full speed ahead, directly toward the German battleship. His crew understood what was happening. A seaman aboard Jervis Bay later described it with 5 words: It was like a bulldog attacking a bear. Fegen opened fire with all guns despite being hopelessly out of range, deliberately drawing Scheer's attention away from the scattering convoy. Every shell fell short. The waterspouts erupted hundreds of yards from Scheer's hull. The Germans could see the splashes, well inside their own position. Cranky did not need to evade. He simply turned broadside, brought both triple turrets to bear, and opened fire. If you are watching this and wondering how a ship that could not even reach the enemy managed to save an entire convoy, subscribe. This channel covers the forgotten stories of ships and weapons that history overlooked, and the next 3 minutes of this story are the reason Jervis Bay earned the only Victoria Cross for convoy escort in the entire war. Scheer's first ranging salvo sent 100-pound water columns erupting 50 yards off Jervis Bay's bow, soaking the forward gun crews in freezing Atlantic spray. The second salvo was closer. Shrapnel from a near miss decapitated a gunner at his station. Then came the third salvo. A direct hit on the bridge and foredeck destroyed everything in a single stroke. The foremast collapsed, the rangefinder shattered. The fire control transmitting station went dead. Electrical cables severed. The radio cabin took a direct hit, killing the operator and 2 coders, blowing the port bulkhead into the sea. In the space of 30 seconds, Jervis Bay ceased to function as a fighting unit. Her guns could now only fire independently under local control, each crew aiming by eye with no centralized direction. And in that same salvo, Captain Fegen's arm was almost completely severed. Quartermaster Sam Patience looked up from the wrecked wheelhouse and saw the captain standing in the wreckage with one arm hanging by a strip of flesh, blood running over the 4 gold stripes on his sleeve. Fegen did not go below. When he was told the steering gear was out, his voice came back through the voice tube, strained but clear, ordering the crew to man the aft steering position. He struggled down the starboard side of the bridge, aided by a signalman, stopped to encourage a gunner along the way, and ordered more smoke deployed. When Cranky tried to alter course to pursue the scattering convoy, Fegen put Jervis Bay's helm over onto a direct collision course, blocking the German's path with the burning hulk of his own ship. Cranky had no choice but to deal with Jervis Bay first. Every minute he spent destroying her was a minute the convoy used to scatter deeper into the gathering darkness. The forward port gun was blown off the forecastle with its mounting and its entire crew. Men on fire jumped into the North Atlantic. Cordite charges on the aft gun platform exploded, and the Germans mistook the flash for continued resistance, delivering another full broadside into a ship that was already finished. A seaman climbed the mast and nailed a replacement white ensign to the stump after the original was shot away. The traditional signal that a ship will not surrender. Cranky expended 335 shells, destroying Jervis Bay. 22 minutes after the first effective hit, the senior surviving officer, Lieutenant Commander George Rowe, gave the order to abandon ship. By that point, virtually every structure above the waterline was destroyed. The 24,000 steel drums in the hold did exactly what the Admiralty had intended. They kept the hull afloat and burning, a towering pillar of smoke and flame visible for miles, drawing Scheer's full attention while 32 merchant ships vanished into the North Atlantic night. In his war diary, Cranky recorded that Jervis Bay's return fire had been prompt, indicating trained naval men. But every shot fell short. A single shell landed close enough to send spray onto Scheer's deck, likely a freak overcharged round, and that was the closest Jervis Bay came to touching the enemy in the entire engagement. The Caithness archives recorded the assessment bluntly: 190 men dead, and not so much as a scratch on the enemy warship. Cranka's own crew could not hide their admiration. His post-war memoir paid generous tribute to the courage of Jervis Bay's men. Cranka himself had a more practical concern. He had just expended 1/3 of his heavy-caliber ammunition on a single ship, and the sun had set. Scheer turned on the scattering convoy in darkness. Without daylight, reduced to searchlights and star shells, Cranky managed to find and sink 5 merchant ships. The freighter Maidan, carrying ammunition and military vehicles, blew up with all 91 crew. The freighter Beaverford, loaded with aluminium, copper, and ammunition, was hunted down and torpedoed. Her 77 crew were all lost. In total, Scheer sank approximately 33,000 tons of merchant shipping from the convoy. But 32 ships escaped. The tanker San Demetrio, carrying 12,000 tons of aviation fuel, was abandoned after being hit, but was reboarded 2 days later by her own crew, who sailed her without a compass to the Clyde. Her story became the 1943 film San Demetrio, London. That night, while Scheer hunted in the dark, the Swedish freighter Sturholm turned back. Her captain, Sven Olander, called his crew together and asked if they were willing to return to the battle area. His words were simple. "She gave us a chance to run for it," he said. "Now I would like to go back and see if there is anyone still in the water." The vote was nearly unanimous. Under cover of darkness, Sturholm found the sole surviving lifeboat and pulled 68 men from the freezing Atlantic. 3 died of wounds and were buried at sea under the Swedish flag, no Union Jack being available. Captain Olander sang a Protestant hymn over the bodies. 65 survivors reached Halifax on the 12th of November. 5 weeks later, Sturholm sailed with convoy HX-92. On the 12th of December, 1940, she was torpedoed and sunk by U-96. All 32 crew were lost. Captain Olander was not aboard that voyage. He survived the war. No official British award was ever given to Sturholm's crew. Fegen's Victoria Cross was gazetted on the 22nd of November, 1940, just 17 days after the action. The speed of the award reflected both the scale of the sacrifice and Britain's desperate need for heroes during the Blitz. The citation used language rarely seen in official documents. It spoke of valor in the face of hopeless odds, and of giving his life to save the many ships it was his duty to protect. It was the only Victoria Cross awarded for convoy escort duty in the entire 6-year war. King George VI wrote in his diary that when Captain Fegen attacked the Admiral Scheer, he knew he was going to certain death. When the survivors arrived at St. John's, Newfoundland, stores closed. School children were given a half-day holiday. Thousands lined the streets. The Admiralty launched a massive naval response after receiving Fegen's position signal. Battle cruisers Hood and Repulse, multiple cruisers and destroyers, sailed from Scapa Flow. They arrived too late. Admiral Scheer had already disappeared into the South Atlantic, where she would continue raiding for another 5 months, eventually reaching the Indian Ocean before returning to Kiel on the 1st of April, 1941. She was the most successful German capital ship raider of the entire war, but she never entered the Atlantic convoy lanes again. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Our community stretches across the entire world. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Click the video on the left to watch more.